Detective Jackson, can you please state your name and badge number for the record?
Yes, it's Detective Daniel William Jackson. My badge number is 7853.
And where are you currently employed?
I'm currently a detective with the Austin Police Department's Cold Case Homicide and Missing Persons Unit.
Okay. Let's go back and talk about your history for a little bit. You have a graduate degree, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that degree in?
It's a Master of Arts in Anthropology.
Okay. And did you have a subspecialty?
Yes, in Forensic Anthropology.
And what exactly is forensic anthropology?
It's the application of physical anthropology, the study of the human skeleton, and it applies to the field of forensic science.
And what year did you get that degree?
In 2005.
And what was your first job after you finished school?
In October of 2005, I was employed by the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office and stayed there for approximately 9 years.
And what were your responsibilities there?
My primary job was an investigator, a crime scene or death investigator, as they're often called. However, given my background in anthropology, they didn't have an anthropologist on staff. They had me do a dual role where anytime we actually had a skeletal remains case, I would sort of break off from my normal duties and handle those cases.
And as part of the skeletal remains project, you worked with the DNA lab at the University of North Texas, is that correct?
Yes, that job also sort of morphed into, I began, I guess you could say, managing all the unidentified remains cases that had amassed over the years there at the ME's office. And part of that, to get those people identified, is working with the University of North Texas to do DNA testing on different samples for CODIS or familial testing on missing persons.
And so is it fair to say that you have much more than a rudimentary understanding of DNA?
I'd say so, just because it became part of my job, and it has been for the last 20 years.
And approximately how many deaths did you investigate while you were at the ME's office?
I authored over 4,000 reports.
And what year did you leave the ME's office?
I left in July of 2014.
And from there you went to the Austin Police Department?
Yes, in August of 2014.
And eventually you became a homicide detective?
Yes, I promoted a detective in the spring of 2020 and was assigned to the homicide unit.
And you moved to cold case mid-spring 2022?
Yes, I think it was late May of 22.
And what case did your sergeant assign you?
On the first day, he sat me down and asked if I would take over this case, the murders of Eliza Thomas, Amy Ayers, Jennifer and Sarah Harbison, that everyone refers to as the yogurt shop murders.
Have you reached a conclusion as to who you think committed the murders?
Yes, I have.
And who is that?
Robert Eugene Brashers, or Brashers, I say both ways.
And are there members of the team that you worked with here in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to recognize Lieutenant Becky Briegel of the Austin Police Department Cold Case Unit, Sergeant Melanie Rodriguez of the Austin Police Department Cold Case Unit. I'd also like to recognize Mindy Montford, formerly of the Texas Attorney General Cold Case Unit lead. And there are other members of the team who couldn't be here today as well.
Many more, yes. This was a huge effort.
Yes. Let's go back to the beginning of the assignment. You're aware that 4 people were arrested for the yogurt shop murders in 1999, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Forrest Welborn was 15 years old at the time of the murders, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And a grand jury did not return an indictment for him.
Correct.
Maurice Pierce was 16 years old at the time of the murder, and his cases were dismissed prior to his trial, is that correct?
Correct.
Robert Springsteen was convicted and sentenced to death.
Yes, ma'am.
And Michael Scott was also convicted in 2002 and sentenced to life without parole.
Yes, ma'am.
And you're aware that the 2 convictions were overturned, sent back to Travis County, and you're aware that while preparing for a new trial, more DNA testing was done and all 4 were excluded from the DNA samples tested, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that had been the DNA from a vaginal swab?
Yes.
Before we go into the details as to how you concluded that Robert Brashers was the perpetrator, you've previously stated you did not review the confessions that were used in the prosecutions prior to starting as part of your investigation, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Excuse me. And why was that?
For several reasons. Mainly, I didn't want to put myself into a position where I had confirmation bias. I thought, and that goes both ways. I didn't want to listen to them and think, wow, these guys are guilty as sin, and I'm going to find a way to arrest them and discount or not put as much weight, even if it's subconsciously, on evidence that may be pointed somewhere else. And conversely, if I would listen to the confessions and thought, I would think these guys, got coerced and got railroaded, I even subconsciously might discount evidence that pointed towards them. So I just left it, I don't know who did this. And I also thought that if there was new evidence that pointed to the 4 suspects and they were brought to trial again, and I was asked, or it was brought up during, say, cross-examination, the police department's been after these guys for 25 years, is there some sort of bias here? I could swear under oath, never listen to a word they said. This is where my investigation brought me.
Great. And scientists sometimes call this a bias mitigating strategy, is that correct?
Yes.
And did your investigation uncover any forensic or physical evidence connecting any of the 4 to the murders?
No.
Did your investigation uncover any evidence connecting the 4 to Robert Brashers in any way?
No.
And your conclusion today is that the 4 were not involved in the murders, correct?
That is correct.
And you concluded that Brashers was the perpetrator based primarily on DNA, ballistics, and modus operandi evidence?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd ask for permission for Detective Jackson to have a narrative presentation at this time.
Yes, you may.
I'm sorry, who said no objection? No objection, thank you.
Detective, you may proceed in a narrative fashion.
Okay, thank you, Judge.
Please slow down.
Okay.
And pull the microphone up just a little bit, the tip of it. There.
Is that better?
That's better,
Okay.
thank you.
So we're going to walk you through a PowerPoint presentation here. It's very similar but slimmed down from the press conference we held in September. And I believe the state will stop me at different points to get clarification on things.
Go back and forth. I think I'll see how it goes.
So we all know why we're here today. This is just the picture of the outside of the yogurt shop, how it looked the morning after. Looks very similar today, except it's a nail salon. But as you can see here, there was already a memorial being started for these girls. And let's not forget today, while we're here as well, 4 lives were lost tragically that night. And Eliza Thomas, Amy Ayers, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison were brutally killed, and their families have been frozen in time for 34 years. Here's just a sort of an overall bird's eye view diagram of what the yogurt shop looked like. It's your standard sort of retail space in a strip mall. The girls' bodies were found in the back, and that's where the fire started. The front door had been locked from the inside, and it appeared the perpetrator had exited the rear door. So what they knew back then was that the perpetrator came in at or near closing time, and the girls were later found by the fire department nude, tied up with their own clothing, and with bindings and ligatures. There was evidence of sexual assault. All 4 girls had been executed. They were shot in the head with a .22 caliber pistol. Amy Ayers was shot a second time with a .380 semi-automatic handgun, and then the building was set on fire. So you have to remember this is 1991. DNA technology was just coming around, but they did have the foresight to go ahead and collect swabs from the girls, both at the scene and then later at the autopsy the next day. One of the only other pieces of evidence that was recovered was a spent or fired cartridge casing from a .380 handgun, and it was recovered from the floor drain during the processing of the crime scene. But with the fire and the water, basically destroyed the chance of getting any other type of evidence. In 1999, the 4 men that we're here today about were arrested and on 4 counts of capital murder. It's Mr. Maurice, Pierce, Forrest, Welborn, Robert Springsteen, and Michael Scott. During interrogation, we know that Mr. Springsteen and Mr. Scott both confessed, implicated the others as well. Forrest, Welborn, and Maurice Pierce did not. They were all arrested anyway. Mr. Welborn was no bail by the grand jury, and Mr. Pierce's charges were eventually dropped. The 2 men who confessed were put on trial separately. Both were found guilty, primarily based on their confessions, with no physical evidence. And we know that Mr. Scott received life without parole. Mr. Springsteen was sentenced to death. And there was still no physical evidence to link these men to the crime. We know that in 2006 and 2007, respectively, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals granted them new trial. So in preparation for this trial, the district attorney's office and the police department decided to try to get physical evidence that would shore up this case. And by this time, there had been a new technology that had sort of arrived called YSTR DNA testing. YSTR, do we want to go into?
Yeah, can you just describe it?
Sure. So YSTR testing, one second, is a form of DNA testing that only looks at genetic material found in certain locations on the Y chromosome. So that's the male chromosome. And it only looks for specific, particular locations, so that each case, say you're looking at 16 genetic points, the same 16 for each test you do. And at this time, 16 was a complete profile. We have more now, but at that time, one of the swabs that was taken from a sexual assault kit found a YSTR profile, and it excluded all 4 of the young men. So until the identity of that YSTR was known, the district attorney's office dropped the charges pending further investigation, and they began a massive investigation to find out who this donor of the profile was. I don't know how many people we've tested since then. I mean, it's 400 or 500. I mean, I was still testing, doing direct testing many times, even when I got the case. But you know, we're here. So they wanted to eliminate any contamination. Friends, family, firefighters, police, medical examiner personnel, associates, friends, everything. And the identity remained unknown.
And do you have any concerns that there was contamination?
No. Because we found the same, let's say the collective judicial, or the DNA labs in the police department have found consistently the same profile that was collected by different people and sent to different labs in different decades, and it's all the same. One of the problems with the DNA testing is that we didn't have a whole lot, right? The destruction of the fire, the technology back then, even since 2008, you're talking about very, very low quantities of DNA. This is not something that we can just put into a database and a name pops out like you see on television. In 2018, technology had advanced when it comes to YSTR testing, and these some of these DNA extracts were sent to Signature Science, and a more complete profile was returned. More markers were identified, but we still didn't know who this person was.
And at this time, it went up to 25 or 26 markers?
It's 25, and then at 2 loci, there's a double allele. So yeah, 25 to 27 markers, depending on how you want to phrase it.
And nothing changed in terms of 4 remained excluded?
This continued to exclude all 4. It was the original 16 and plus another 9, but those 9 didn't, still excluded. I came on the case in 2022 and spent a few months sort of getting caught up to speed on what we have, what we didn't have. But one of the things I did, and this is Mindy's idea, Mindy Monford, is she was hosting a cold case conference at the AG's office, and she had the idea of, well, we've got all these subject matter experts in one room, why don't we all sit down and go over what we have, and maybe we can get some ideas of how we can push this case further along. And they all agreed. I mean, I think half of them changed their flights to stay the other afternoon. And we sat at a big conference table, and we went over spreadsheets, chain of custody logs, evidence logs, pictures, and sort of brainstormed what we could maybe do, what do we have and what can we do with it. And so that was sort of the testing strategy moving forward was that we met with these experts. It wasn't a set quarterly or whatever, every few weeks, months, whether it's in person or Teams or just texting. But there was always an agenda. There was updates. I mean, we sort of approached this a little bit differently. But during that time, we weren't able to get any new scientific advancements that broke the case open. We still excluded a lot of people. We sent things out for testing, but didn't pan out. However, in late June, the very end of June of 2025, I decided to revisit some of the evidence. One of the items I was interested in was the spent .380 shell cartridge casing that had been found in the floor drain. And there's now been, over the last few years, a technique that you can extract DNA from spent shell casings. It's gotten a pretty good success over the last couple of years. So I thought maybe that's a possibility. It was in the floor drain, probably not the greatest sample if it's in a floor drain, but let's look into it and see what we can do. And I wanted to make sure I could follow the chain of custody and knew where this casing was. Do we have it? Does the state lab have it? Where is it? And so through the chain of custody, I saw that, yes, we still had possession of it, but also there was a note that it had been submitted in 1997. Later, I found out in 2007 as well, that in 1997, this casing had been submitted to an early ATF database called Ayers. And that was some of the first sort of ballistics comparison database that existed. So once you submit a casing into the system, it's no longer a candidate for DNA extraction because the imaging software that you put it in is not sterile. So there's potential to get DNA from whatever last casing was put in there. So we knew DNA was out. But in talking to our task force with the ATF here, I mentioned that it had been put in 1997 and asked if that data rolled over to the new system, to NIBIN. I said, well, it should, but whether it did or not, you should resubmit it.
Can I stop you right there?
Mhm.
This is based on the premise that when a bullet's fired from a gun, the casing's expelled, the casing's gonna have markings on it, is that right?
Correct.
And they're gonna have markings that would show the type of gun that it was fired from?
Yes.
Or can?
It can. The more, I guess, precise way to tell what type of gun it was fired from was from the actual projectile, the bullet itself, not the spent casing. Because a bullet will have the grooves and markings that are unique to make and models.
And then the casings, though, may have individual characteristics that would be different than any other casing fired out of a different gun.
Correct. You can link casings fired from the same weapon based off of like firing pin and crimping and stuff like that. The microscopic indentations that are created that are unique to a gun.
Almost like a gun's unique DNA.
Correct. Like so, this database, the NIBIN system is kind of like a CODIS for spent casings. The ATF sergeant, I don't think he's here today, but he said, even if it had been submitted back then, do it again. It's not going to hurt because it's not like DNA where every time you test it, you're depleting a source. The casings doesn't go away. So he said also, the software has gotten so much better over the last few years with NIBIN, almost doing like 3D modeling, that the precision of this software, of these images, is getting hits on cases that previously did not. So we submitted it on the morning of July 2nd, 2025. And on the afternoon of July 2nd, 2025, Sergeant Riley called me and put me on a conference call with Melanie Rodriguez and said, well, there's been a hit. And they got a hit to an unsolved murder in Lexington, Kentucky of Linda Rutledge.
And can you describe the circumstances of that murder?
Yes, Linda was found murdered in her parents' business. It was a hearing aid store, and it was in a strip mall in Lexington, Kentucky. This was November of 1998, so 7 years after ours. And she was found in the back of the business. She had been shot in the head with the same .380, and she was found nude, and the building had been set on fire. The door was locked from the inside, and the perpetrator appeared to have exited the back and stole her car.
And had she been bound as well?
Actually, I don't think she was. Yeah, just her clothing was pretty much burned up. There wasn't any clothing left.
And then you all traveled to Kentucky, is that right?
Yes. So myself, Mindy Monfort, and Sergeant Rodriguez, along with Detective Jednek, we reached out to the guys in Lexington and decided we should all meet up in person and go over our cases. So we went up there for, I think, 4 or 5 days. And we realized the crimes did share a similar MO and modus operandi. A lot of details were the same, and the same gun was used. But aside from that, we were looking at, can we find, is anybody in your case file and my case file, somebody you looked at that pops up both places? Any connection from Texas to the Kentucky case and vice versa, and we could find none. So we kind of left with more questions and answers. So we still didn't know who did. Both were unsolved, and we didn't have any common names in those boxes. So talking with Kentucky, they had, the Lexington Police Department, they had collected evidence for DNA testing, and so they had a testing strategy to move forward. Some things had never been tested before.
Was one of those things the sex assault kit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I spoke with their state lab, and I said, well, we don't have a CODIS profile, but we have a YSTR. Do you have a YSTR? And they said, no, but we can get one. We've got enough DNA, we can type one out for you. I said, great, so we can see if you can further evidence that we're talking about the same guy.
And is that because if they had done regular DNA testing, we only had a YSTR profile and we would not have been able to compare the two? Is
Correct.
that right?
Yeah. And so then I asked, well, does your state lab collect Y profiles as routine for like familial testing? Because that's some places do, some places don't. And they said, yeah, we do. And I asked if they could manually search their database, and because it's not an automated system where you just upload it and it gives, it continuously runs and like a CODIS. You have to sort of manually type it in, and then it's no longer there. So like even if the perpetrator was entered the next day, you wouldn't know. So it's only what's been collected so far. And they said, yeah, we can do we do that. I said, well, can you do a manual search? I'm going to send you my YSTR, and you search manually. And that then led to, well, if I'm asking Kentucky to do this, why don't we ask everybody to do this? All the labs, the public labs in the country that collect YSTR data. Our CODIS administrator here in Austin sent out a request letter to all the labs in the country asking, if you collect YSTR data, will you manually search your database to are unknown? And this has been done once before. This has been done in 2019, and with 0 results. So we thought, let's do it. It's been several years. Let's do it again. There's more labs coming on board now collecting Y data, and so let's give this another shot. It's not something you want to ask a lab to do every week because you're asking them to stop what they're doing. We all know DNA labs around the country are backed up. So if you're continually asking them, there's a good chance they're going to stop responding to you. So we did that in, it was in August. We pushed that out in August. We had one lab, the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division State DNA lab, that returned a quote hit or match. All the other labs in the country that were collecting Ys at the time returned 0 hits to our 25 marker profile.
And when you say match, it means that the 25 markers we had were the same as the 25 markers in the South Carolina YSTR profile.
Correct, yes. And their profile was from a solved sexual assault and murder that occurred in 1990 in Greenville, South Carolina. And they had solved that case and had a suspect. This was the first time anyone had asked South Carolina to do this, so it took a couple of weeks to get it done and verify for accuracy and things like that. But they got back to us and said, this is who the profile we have belongs to. And it's Robert Eugene Brashers.
And had Brashers ever been a suspect in yogurt before?
No,
You got these results?
he was nowhere in our case file. He was nowhere in a lot of case files, but found out later.
And most of his crimes were discovered after he died in 99, is that correct?
Yes. So I started collaborating with Tim Conroy there in Greenville, South Carolina, and he kind of went over the details of their case. There were some things that were different, but there were some similarities.
Can you talk about what the Greenville case, the facts of that?
Well, when we first talked that Friday evening that I got the letter, he said, he goes, "Your victim," and I said, "Victims." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, we have 4 little girls murdered, and because he didn't know the case at all. And he said, "Well, your little girls tied up with their own clothing," and gave me chills. Still does. And he said, "Yeah, that was the same in our case. Brashers tied up Genevieve Zatriki in her apartment, bound her with her pantyhose, strangled her, sexually assaulted her, and then instead of didn't set the building on fire, but he put her in the bathtub and then turned the water on. And I guess to get rid of any potential evidence, and then fled the scene." So one of the things we did was I asked Lieutenant Conroy if the South Carolina lab still had biological evidence from Robert Brashers, and they did. So they sent some biological tissue to us, and we had Signature Science do a 1-to-1 comparison to our Y profile to make sure that it is the same, to do a direct, to confirm that, and also have Signature Science tell us population statistics. How common is this Y? And it's not very common. There's some unique markers in there. And they estimated that it only occurs in about 0.12% of the population. So we thought we may be, all right, we're on to something now.
So just to recap, although South Carolina had a YSTR profile, Signature Science got biological material from Brashers, created a new YSTO profile out of that to compare with the YSTR we had from yogurt.
Yes.
Okay.
Similar to if you get a hit in CODIS, you still go out and collect a sample from that offender to do a 1-to-1 to your crime scene.
Great.
So we started looking into Mr. Brasher's history, trying to figure out what he did and who he was, and found out that he was a known serial killer, known for a lot of violent offenses. The first, and also, when I talk about Brashers, I also have to, everything I say about him, I have to qualify something. Oh, sorry. One thing about Brashers, and I'll probably do it here a couple times, is that anytime we talk about him, I usually have to qualify it with that we know of, because there's still so much we don't know. But one of the things we do know is that his first known felony was in 1985. He attempted to make sexual advances on a woman. She resisted. He shot her, but she survived. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but he was granted parole in 1989.
So this is a chart showing kind of a timeline of his violent crimes that we know of. As you stated, there may be more. Let's briefly go through them. After he was paroled in 89, in 1990 was the South Carolina case.
Yes, ma'am.
And in that case, as you stated, the victim was bound, killed, and then placed in the bathtub to what we think covered his tracks.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then we believe he committed yogurt in
Yes,
91.
ma'am.
We know he was arrested in 1991, and we'll get to that in a minute, but he was then incarcerated from 92 to 97.
Yes.
Right? And then about a month after he was released, he went to Memphis.
Yes.
What were the basic facts of the Memphis case?
He conducted a home invasion where 4 women were inside a residence and displayed a firearm and made them all, bound them all with different ligatures, and then sexually assaulted the youngest girl.
Okay. And it was 3 adult women and then the mother, including the mother of the 14-year-old, is that right?
Yes.
And they lived.
Yes, they all lived.
And we know that he was able to overtake all 4 by himself.
Yes.
And in their descriptions, he had a gun, they were scared, and he was able to make them tie themselves up and sexually assault the 14-year-old. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then in 1998, we have the Shearer murders, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What were the facts of that one?
A man and his son had left briefly to run errands, and they were only gone for about 40 minutes. And when they arrived back at their home, he found his wife and daughter had been tied up and shot in the back of the head. And the youngest girl, Megan, had been sexually assaulted.
And she was 12 years old?
Yes.
Correct. And then that same day after he left the Shearer residence, he went to Dyersburg, Tennessee?
Yes, about 2 hours later, he attempted another home invasion in Tennessee. And fortunately, the woman was able to get the door closed. He did fire 1 round and shot her in the arm, but then fled the scene. And they were able to link, based off the description of him, they went further, investigated. The Missouri police and the Dyersburg police took the projectiles from both scenes and were able to confirm this was the same assailant.
Sort of how you were able to connect the yogurt shop casing with the Kentucky casing.
Yes.
And then that was in March of 98, and then we've got November of 98, Lexington.
Yes.
Okay. And as you described, that was a business that was set on fire.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then Brashers committed suicide in January of 99.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to make you go through this chart. This was put together by Pam Mazak at the Texas Attorney General's office.
Yes. This is sort of an association chart of evidence and crimes that we know of.
Okay. And this demonstrates, I think, the complexity of the investigation and the amount of evidence that we have against Brashers at this point.
Yes, this chart was a collaborative effort of local, state, and federal investigators over many, many years, including a whole lot in the last few months. But each piece of this puzzle is linked to Brashers. So real quickly, Brashers never paid for any of his crimes, except that one in Florida. He was clever. He was able to evade justice for many years. He would change his name. He had multiple aliases, birth certificates. Sorry, not too fast. Okay. He wrote an obituary for himself and published it in a couple of different papers. He was in multiple states. He was always traveling. He rarely, that we know of, committed a crime where he lived. And so we wanted to look at, well, he's looking pretty good for our case, but where was he in December of 1991? You know, was he in prison? You know, can we place him in Austin or Texas at all? So we here in Austin started researching Brashers to try to figure out if we can place him in connection with the yogurt shop. So remember, murders of these girls occurred on December 6, 1991. Well, we found out through records research that Robert Eugene Brashers was stopped less than 48 hours later leaving Texas. He was stopped at a border checkpoint going I-10 west out of the state near Las Cruces. And during this checkpoint, the Border Patrol agent discovered not only was he driving a stolen truck that had been reported stolen 9 days earlier out of Georgia, but he was in possession of a 380 AMT backup model with that serial number. Now the 380 AMT backup model was what ballistics report said in all probability was the make and model of the gun used at the yogurt shop. So he's got the same make and model 48 hours later and with that specific serial number that comes in important later. So he's charged with auto theft and felon in possession of a firearm. It was probably seemingly not important at the time, but the gun was released to his father at some point. There's no date when it was released to his father, but it's in the record that it was turned back over to his father.
And after he was initially stopped, he fled for about a mile and then stopped.
Yes, and then gave up.
Do you have any theories, and I know it's nothing we could be definitive about what happened in that mile?
My theory is that he knew he couldn't do anything about the 380, but if he was still in possession of a 22, they needed to get rid of it. There's really no reason to flee after a checkpoint and then stop a mile. If you're gonna flee, you keep going. It's very desolate, there's no artificial light out there, so if he threw a gun out the window, you wouldn't see it. And so that was our theory. We have no way to prove that.
And they never did an inventory of the other items, any other items in the car, is that right?
No, unfortunately, there was no inventory. The only inventory that was done was items missing because the truck was a construction vehicle, and so there was a lot of tools that were no longer there.
And there were items missing from the girls. Amy's brother's jacket was missing from yogurt, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, but that was never recovered, and we don't know if it was in Brasher's truck because they never did an inventory.
Correct, there's no inventory, no. So we're getting there, but we're not quite there yet. All we have is a Y profile, and there's limitations to Ys. They're good at excluding suspects from cases, but it's really hard to say definitively, or you can't really say definitively if it is that person, because they're not as discriminatory as a traditional autosomal DNA profile for like CODIS, or like, so you can have people with the same Y profiles. So he's looking pretty good. I mean, we could, if he was alive, we'd arrest him, but we gotta be beyond probable cause here. He's dead, so we gotta be at beyond reasonable doubt. So in September of 2025, we, in coordination with DNA Labs International, we submitted some more items for additional DNA testing. And while these items had been screened previously or tested previously, we thought, technology's gotten better. We don't think we'll get enough DNA for a full CODIS profile, but it's possible we could get enough DNA to do a one-to-one direct comparison to Brashers. And because that's a different threshold. The quality and quantity, you can have less. So, male DNA was found on the fingernails of Amy Ayers, on her left fingernail clippings that had been taken at autopsy, and we were able to directly compare those to Robert Brashers, and the DNA was the same.
And sorry, just to be clear, the 4 were excluded from that sample as well?
Yes, we've done additional testing since, and everything we've tested has excluded them as well. So now we have his DNA, his autosomal DNA, and his Y profile at the crime scene. And we believe, and it's my opinion, that the gun that he was stopped with 2 days later was the gun that was used to kill Amy Ayers. He was released from prison in 1997. His dad was able to get the pistol back. Then we have the Lexington, Kentucky murder in 1998, which was an AMT backup model, and it's the same gun used in yoga shop. Then a month later, or 2 months later, he commits suicide with an AMT backup model, a .380 caliber pistol, and it's the same handgun he was stopped with on I-10. We know that by the serial number.
And when he committed suicide, he'd also been in possession of a 9mm?
Yes, he had 2 guns at that time, and he threw the 9mm out the window and chose the less powerful gun. And we know why now, that this gun was his prize, that he shot himself with that .380.
And it took him 6 days to die.
Yes.
You've said before that confessions and the science both can't be true. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. For example, in the confessions, there's various narratives of some of the 4 being in possession of the .380 after yogurt shop.
Correct.
Is it your opinion that that's possible, based on what you know about the .380?
Based on that last slide, no, that is not possible.
In the confessions, there's no mention of an unknown male being part of the crime. Based on what you know about the DNA, is that possible?
No, the DNA points to one man.
And in the confessions, there were confessions to the sexual assaults.
Yes.
Based on what you know about the exclusions of the 4 from the vaginal swabs, is that possible?
No. Just a little bit more about him, and then we'll be done with Brashers, hopefully, for a while. The MO, he's documented to carry more than 1 gun at a time. He ties up his victims, sometimes with their own clothing. He sexually assaults young females. He often shoots them in the back of the head. And in Kentucky, we know it was the same gun, similar details, and now, since Kentucky has worked their case, they have confirmed with DNA that Robert Eugene Brashers is a suspect in that, and then in their murder of Linda Rutledge. So, based on the DNA, ballistics, and modus operandi evidence, it is my conclusion that the deaths of Amy Ayers, Eliza Thomas, Jennifer Harbison, and Sarah Harbison were committed by Robert Eugene Brashers. Based on that, I further conclude that Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Forrest Welborn, and Maurice Scott did not commit these murders. Thank you.
Thank you, Detective Jackson, and thank you for your investigation and hard work. I have no further questions.
Do the attorneys for the exonerees have any questions of this witness?
I have no questions, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
No questions.
Thank you. Detective, you may step down.
Thank you.